phone. It is not one situation. We have already received indications in courts in various different parts of the United States from the federal government that they want to use the same technique and the same legal authority, although we think their legal authority is quite weak, in other cases, not just terrorism cases, but criminal cases, drug cases, other cases like that. Furthermore, the district attorney in New York has stated repeatedly that he has 175 cell phones. He wants to do the same thing in other cases to achieve access. What the government is doing, there's not hyperbole on our side. This is a statement of fact. This, if it happens today, it can happen in other cases on as equally thin a showing. The government hasn't shown that there is anything that they expect to obtain here. They would just like to look. They're asking Apple to design a new system to encryption, to cripple the product that is so carefully created in response to the demands of the public all over the world for a product that secures their information and makes them safe. This is something that's very, very significant. There's no way that the government can justify by saying this is just one case or just one circumstance or just limited to terrorism. That is plainly not true, and they know it.
If you'll indulge, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, Ted, so if you think I've been crass, it's not my intention, but your former wife died, Barbara Olson, on a hijacked American Airlines Flight 77. That was the one that crashed into the Pentagon. She had called you a couple of times from the plane before it did. If you knew or could have had access to the perpetrators behind that attack and their phones to reveal with whom they were communicating and what they were plotting, wouldn't you want to get your hands on that?
I'm sure that any person who could foresee a terrorist act affecting a member of their family or themselves would do anything and probably be willing to violate the laws and would throw away the Constitution. But as you know, I served in the Justice Department. In that time, I was there when 9/11 happened. I helped work with the FBI and other members of the Justice Department to devise legal tools that we could present to Congress, get congressional support for, that would help us seek out and prevent terrorism, but also at the same time protect the civil liberties of all our citizens. We realized, Neil, let me just finish. We realized that it was very, very important to deal with terrorism, but also to preserve the fundamental liberties that are protected by the Constitution. There's a balance there. We worked hard to sustain that balance, and we went to Congress for the authority. This is something that this administration has not done with respect to the same subject we're talking about here. They had proposed legislation that would have dealt with this issue. They withdrew that legislation and did not submit it to Congress.
All right, but we now know after the fact here. It's one thing, as I ventured with you, you knew before the fact that the perpetrators behind those 9/11 attacks, what they were up to. That's one thing. Here we have the actual phone of the actual perpetrator in an attack that killed more than a dozen. Is there anything to debate here?
Yes, there is something to debate. And can the government, with very little showing, without congressional authority, go to you and ask you to violate your rights or the rights of the people that you work with? Suppose that they want sources, confidential sources that have worked with you. You have to defend the constitutional rights that protect us all, including people that are all over this country. We're also talking about tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people, that if Apple is forced to create a system to disable the security in its phones, will represent serious threats to people all over the world.
They say that's not the case. It's one phone. It's one and none. It's this phone. It's the phone of the perpetrator behind this terrorist attack. You open that phone, and you don't have to make a constitutional argument out of it. Just open the phone and find out.
You're not listening to me. They're requiring a change in the system that we have already got legal proceedings pending in various other courts throughout the United States that would address this same subject and would move forward with respect to penetrating other cell phones. Once it is done, Pandora's box is open for the government to keep saying this is one phone, one situation. How do I know that?
How do you know? It's, what if they said, it's just this phone, open this phone, we want to know who the hell this guy was talking to, communicating with, just this phone.
They're already saying they want to use this same authority in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in the Northern District of Chicago, or Illinois. We've got pending proceedings throughout the country where the government is asking the same thing. And as I said, the District Attorney of New York has said, I have 175 cell phones here. As soon as the government gets what it wants in San Bernardino, I intend absolutely, he said, I intend absolutely to use that same authority with respect to those other 175 phones. And there are district attorneys or law enforcement authorities all over the country that want this same authority. They want Apple to design a system to change its iPhone, to disable its encryption system so that law enforcement authorities can get it whenever they put together a
But what if it never came
like
to that?
this.
What if it's a one and done case with this one? I know you're doing it, but here's the key point. If they could just see this phone, who this guy communicated, this was a terror attack in this country. We know the guy who did it. We don't know what exactly was happening in about a 20-minute time frame. It might be on that phone. This is the only means by which to get it. You're not making argument how you get into the phone or leaving the feds with any knowledge or secret access to that phone. You've opened it up, or a technician has opened it up. One and done. That phone, that perpetrator, done.
There is no way to stop it when the genie is out of the bottle. We're not just talking about the federal government. We're talking about state and local governments that have law enforcement desires to get into cell phones whenever they think there's a crime or evidence of a crime that be committed. It is not one and done. The government keeps saying this.
But there is evidence here. This is the phone. No, but Ted, this is the phone of the guy behind the attacks.
And these were terrible people. There's no question about that. But if you throw out the Constitution here, when Congress hasn't even acted, why not put this to debate where our elected representatives, the government has a bill that they decided not to submit to Congress, why not have a debate about the balance between security in these cell phones, which tens,
so what would
hundreds
Congress
of
do?
millions of
Set a
people are
standard?
depending upon?
What would Congress do? Set a standard by which, when, and how you can access a phone?
Well, Congress has already done that. There's a Community Assistance for Law Enforcement Act. That law already exists. It does not cover this situation. We're saying that there should be a debate with respect to whether or not and under what circumstances the government can achieve this kind of information. Congress, it shouldn't just be the executive branch. We have elected representatives to consider a balance. FBI Director Jim Comey, who I respect enormously, has specifically said this is a serious issue. It should be debated by the people. There are balances on either side. What in the world is wrong with having the elected branch, the legislative branch, 1/3 of our government, weigh in? That's the place where these things should be debated and resolved.
But do you have any fear that in the time we're waiting to settle what you argue is a bigger constitutional issue, that the very people with whom this terrorist was associating might be out there plotting something else? And we could have stopped it if we simply had access to that phone.
And you can say that every single time. You can say that if we can only break the law, or we can break the back of this individual, if we can break into people's homes, if we can do all these things, we might prevent something awful from happening. But the reason we have a constitution is we do not permit lawless activity, even when people say we need to break the laws in order to prevent a greater harm.
Those victims' families, you can legally argue the point that you do very eloquently and forcefully, but they want answers. And right now we're stuck in this circle of arguing constitutional privacy rights.
We're
presenting on that phone might be the very identities of those who might be plotting something even worse.
You were talking about a parade of horribles before. Everybody can say that. There's going to be terrible things that are happening.
We have the horribles. We already have the horribles on this phone with this guy.
No, I'm just saying that we have to have principles. We have to have balance. By the way, The court specifically set a briefing schedule. We're filing briefs. Both the government and Apple are filing briefs. There will be a hearing in a couple of weeks. Let the magistrate judge decide that. If we're successful, as I believe we are, the government can appeal that. But let the legal process take its place.
Do you think we have that kind of time? Do you think we have that kind of time?
Don't say that okay, I take it that what you're saying is we throw the legal process out, we forget about congressional authority, we forget about the balance of powers in this country, we forget about the Bill of Rights because we want to do something right now.
We want to stop follow-up attacks that might be hinted on that very phone.
I'm surprised that you would take that position because there's no principled basis to stop people in whatever law enforcement area, and we could have it all over the country. There are threats of terrorism in various different places. We have laws to restrain the ability of law enforcement people to ignore the laws. I'm surprised that you don't accept that proposition.
No, I'm surprised that I'm just surprised you don't accept the immediacy of what's at stake here with a phone that belonged to the perpetrator behind an attack whose whereabouts and contacts we don't know but might be on that phone, and we're looking at sort of legal language to excuse the actions of delay, and you might be perfectly right in your constitutional argument. I have no doubt you are. But I am saying that in the meantime, that phone sits there unaccessible, and we have no idea what might be planned next. No,
well, you've just decided that the need is sufficient that we'll throw out the judiciary, we'll throw out Congress,
you're exactly
and
right.
we'll throw out the Constitution.
You're exactly right. The need is sufficient. The need is real. The death of over a dozen people is real. That's your need. That's your urgency. That's what's sufficient.
Okay, the hell with the Constitution. That's basically your position.
No, the hell with more people. No. The hell with more people dying as a result of you playing this legal ass.
I understand your position. You have a program that you can articulate that position any day that you want. It doesn't matter what the rule of law is. It doesn't matter what the Constitution is. You think something should be done right now, and forget about the judiciary and forget about the Constitution. Keep making that point all you want. But if you ask me to come on this program to explain to you the other side of this, and at least you could listen to it.
I just did. And I'm just saying, on that issue and the urgency of that issue, and especially given the trauma that you yourself have gone through, wouldn't you want to make sure something like that never happens again?
If you can make sure that nothing like that happens again by throwing the Constitution in a dustbin, in the first place, that probably wouldn't succeed because there are so many ways in which we can potentially be threatened. But the one thing that we ought to stand for is the way of life that the terrorists wish to take down. They want us to overreact. They want us to disobey the law. They want us to throw away our Constitution. They want us to throw away our civil liberties because they don't like what this country stands for. And I say that it's very, very important for all of us to stand for those principles at the same time we try to root out and prevent terrorism. There's a balance there, and we should invoke the judiciary and we should invoke Congress to do it the right way.
Do you ever think, though, that Ted, with the best of intentions, that you are fueling and feeding the terrorists' own goal here? That they know that there is this process, and they know this is the case.
I must submit that it is an underhanded argument to say anybody that stands up for the principles that this country was founded on, that have kept us safe for 230 years, is favoring terrorism or supporting terrorism. That's an underhanded argument. I'm ashamed of you for doing it.
Now, come on. I am not arguing with the terrorists. I'm just saying they're well aware of our process. They're well aware of how long it will take to access the phone of a terrorist that might identify other terrorists. They know of our legal process. They know of the delays. They know of our arguments trying to settle us in the courts, or as you wish now in Congress, and they are working that and playing us like a fiddle.
Well, that's your point of view. And as far as you're concerned, and I don't know how you could possibly limit this to San Bernardino, because something could be happening somewhere else, New York, San Francisco, everywhere.
Absolutely.
You make the same argument every time, and basically you want to throw the Constitution out because if someone says there's a threat there, we're not even sure that it exists, but if we want into that phone, this phone, your phone, whatever, just to make sure, then you would throw
But
that
Ted,
out.
this isn't an ethereal threat. This is the actual phone of the actual terrorist, right? It's not ethereal.
I know it is, and you can say that again and again with respect to other acts of terrorism, or I would think you'd even make the stronger argument when it was a threat of terrorism, when the terrorism hasn't already occurred, the perpetrators are dead, but you would surely make the same argument if it was an impending threat of terrorism.
No, in this case, we could argue that in a seminar. We now know. It's occurred. People are dead. Terrorist acted. He's dead. We have the phone that he is, right?
Your position is pretty clear, and you very forcefully stated it. The dealing with the threat or the after the fact of events of terrorism